They're here to share some very practical help and hope around places where many people quietly struggle and can get very confused and or discouraged and oftentimes feel very alone. So as an extension of the prayers we just offered, let's welcome our partners from Pisgah Legal Services as they come to share with us how we can find hope, offer hope, and join God's work of justice and compassion in our community. Yay, Tracy!
So my name is Tracy Gruber. I do work at Pisgah Legal Services. My title is Leadership and Legacy Giving Officer, which is just a really fancy title for I help raise the money that makes the work happen. And one of my colleagues, one of our attorneys, is going to join us in a few minutes. He was coming from West Asheville and spent quite a bit of time on the bridge. As I'm sure some of you know, it's not easy to get here on a weeknight. So he'll be here soon. But I'm gonna give you just kind of an overview of what our organization does. And then Casey, who is an attorney that specializes in elder law, is gonna tell you a little bit about his specific program, okay? So, first of all, Pisgah Legal Services has been in Buncombe County for almost 50 years. And we have been doing the work that we do because a lot of folks don't know that, you know, if you commit a crime, you're entitled to free representation, right? You get an attorney, whether you can afford it or not. If you have a civil issue, you are not entitled to that. So civil issues can be anything from maybe you're getting evicted from your rental because you couldn't pay your rent, or maybe you're having an issue with your landlord, like maybe you're living in substandard housing and the landlord has not been willing to fix something. Maybe you're in a domestic violence situation and you need to get a protective order. There are a whole list of things that you could need an attorney for in a civil issue. And I don't know if any of you have had to hire an attorney lately, but they are very, very expensive. I know that just for a simple divorce in our area, the retainer fee for an attorney is about $5,000. So that's just to get you started with the attorney. It goes up from there, right? So it is very expensive and out of the reach of many people. So Pisgah Legal does what we do because we want to help people who are low income to meet their basic needs and disrupt the cycle of poverty. What we see a lot is that when somebody gets into a legal issue and they can't afford to get out of that issue, it kind of snowballs, right? And so it turns into a bigger problem if they can't fix it right away. Let's see here. So let me talk a little bit about who we actually serve. So we serve some of the most vulnerable people in our region. We're talking about, single parents, seniors, people with disabilities. We served about 25,000 people last year. We work with many people who are struggling to make ends meet. And for most of our programs, that's people who are at about 125% of the poverty line or below. And you can see on the screen, that's about $33,000 for a family of 3. However, most of our clients are even lower income than that. So if you can see, the average income of our client last year was about $17,000. So these are folks who are really living on a very slim margin. If they get a speeding ticket that's $200 or $300, they probably can't pay it. And that's where that snowball starts, right? You don't pay the ticket, you have to go to court, you don't show up to court, you lose your license, you keep driving anyway because you need to work, you get pulled over without a license, you're in really big trouble, right? So all of these things can turn into really big problems, and it's sad sometimes because if they just had the money to pay that ticket, they would be okay, right? So it can be really frustrating for a lot of our clients because it's just the lack of funds often that causes those problems. So I talked about the average income. About 3/4 of our clients are women, across all demographic categories like age, race, education levels. Poverty rates tend to be higher for women than for men in North Carolina. And child poverty is also an issue in North Carolina. About 1 in 5 children in our state live in poverty. And we try to prioritize cases where children are in the home if possible. Let's see, so who needs our services? This is anybody who has a partner who's physically abusive. This could be a family who's threatened by eviction because they couldn't afford their rent. It could be a cancer patient who doesn't have health insurance. People who've lost their driver's license, I mentioned that earlier, and they need their license to get to work. Low-wage workers who need help filing tax returns so they can get their tax credits. That's something that we saw in the past. If you're very low income, you're actually not legally required to do taxes, right? You don't have to file. But if you don't file your taxes, you're not getting your earned income tax credits that you're entitled to. And so actually, it's a positive for low income folks to file their taxes because they may actually get money back that they need. And particularly during the pandemic, we saw that as an issue because if they didn't file, then they didn't get any of those stimulus checks. And so for very low income people, that was super important. So we started doing that at that time, and now it's something that's just a regular program for us. We help people file taxes, and we do it for free. So anybody in this room who, I think they have to make under 60,000 and you're eligible to get your taxes done with us. All right, now let's talk about where we serve. We are a big organization. We did not used to be this big, so many people think that we're still a very small nonprofit and that we just serve Buncombe County. That is not true. We serve all 18 counties of Western North Carolina that you see on that screen and the Koala boundary. Every dot that you see is a physical office. So we have offices all around the region, which is great because that means that people, all the way out in Macon County do not have to drive to Buncombe County to get our services. And then we also have this really cool thing that's Gus the Justice Bus. So we take Gus out to even more remote areas where we don't have offices. If we have a client who doesn't have transportation, we can go to them. There's actually Wi-Fi in this bus and a table with chairs set up in the back that don't roll around when we're driving. It's really great. But we can do a whole appointment. We have, all of the equipment that we need to be able to help somebody on location, which is really cool. And we used this a lot after the hurricane as well. So, and one thing I wanted to mention about the hurricane, because we have expanded so much geographically in the last several years, it really set us up to be able to do a lot of work for hurricane recovery when that happened because we were already located in all of those areas. So it was very helpful for us to be able to be proximate to people. All right, so our priority areas, we have a lot of programs, and I'm gonna show you the list in a minute. We have to divide them into priority areas because there are so many that we have to make it a little bit easier for people to understand. So our first one is safety. We want to help people be safe from abuse and other kinds of hate crimes. We also look at housing because we know how important it is that people have access to safe and affordable housing. So we try to keep people in that housing if we can. We also focus on health, so access to quality, meaningful healthcare coverage. We help people get enrolled in healthcare. So if you are having to go to the marketplace and purchase your own insurance, or if you are eligible for Medicaid, we can help you sign up for those and help you navigate that system. I have had to do that before to go into the marketplace and sign up for my own insurance policy, and I had no idea what to do. I mean, I was looking at the options. They all looked terrible, to be honest, and I was like, I don't know what to choose. Do I pay the higher premium, or do I get the lower premium and have the higher deductible? It was so confusing. We have volunteers who can help with that and walk people through that process and make it a little bit easier to navigate. And then also, the fourth area is income. We try to help people get stable income, and that may be through services that they qualify for, right? different government programs that they didn't even know that they qualify for. We've tried to help connect them to those, but also things like, employment issues. We also try to help people just, access the jobs that they want. So this is the full list of our programs that I was telling you about. We have a lot of different things that we do. I won't tell you about all of them because that would take all night, and I know you don't want to be here that long. But Casey's going to tell us a little bit about his elder law program in a little bit. And so he's going to go into detail about what he does in that area. Our homelessness prevention program is focused on helping people who are either being evicted or have a foreclosure that's pending. A lot of times, we may not be able to stop the eviction. We may not be able to keep the person in their home. Sometimes what we can do though, if we can't stop it, we may be able to delay it and at least give the person enough time to find a new place to go so that they don't end up out on the street. Sometimes that is the best we can do, is just to slow something down to give the person time. Other times we may be able to actually do some negotiating with the landlord on the tenant's behalf. Sometimes it's just, misunderstanding, or sometimes it's, anger that gets in the way in a situation. And sometimes just having that intermediary can really help to diffuse the situation and help somebody to have a better outcome. And we do, part of the work that we do is through different partnerships that we have too, like for example, with the homelessness prevention, we actually have an attorney who can sit outside the eviction court at the courthouse, and if somebody comes in and they're not represented, they can go represent that person. And so sometimes it's just that intervention that happens right at the last second. If you talk to some of our attorneys, there's a lot of times that they may see a client and the client's like, well, the deadline for this is tomorrow. And that's kind of how this job can be sometimes. We just heard about somebody this week who, was it a FEMA appeal? That the deadline was today at 6 o'clock, and the client came in and they said, my phone doesn't work, so I can't do the appeal, can you help? And so it just, things like that sometimes happen, and with legal issues, sometimes you're up against a very tight timeline, and it's just, being able to step in and help is really great. Our Justice for All program is our immigration work. We help people who have a legal path to citizenship. Even if they have a legal path, it's still super complicated, and cases can take up to 20 years in some cases. So that program is very complicated, and we have a lot of open cases because they take so long to be resolved. But we were actually able to hire another attorney for that program this year for the first time in years. And so we're able to increase our capacity a little bit in that area. We also do some veterans law. I wish I had brought the papers on that. We had an impact report that came out this year on how much we've helped veterans in our area. And it was astonishing to see the numbers. It was so great to see how many of the folks that we had been able to help to access all of the benefits that they should be getting from their service. And sometimes people just don't know how to navigate those systems and just have a real hard time accessing those things. So it's really great when we see people actually getting all of the services that they are entitled to. Okay, so how we do our work, we have several different ways. Direct service is, sitting down with clients, person to person, and we are able to do that with providing legal advice, representation, getting referrals from other organizations. This takes a lot of different forms. So this could be actually in the courtroom with a client. It could be providing legal advice over the phone, hosting clinics or workshops, which we've done a lot of in the last couple of years, negotiating on a client's behalf. There's lots of different ways that we do that work. And then with community collaboration, this is partnerships with other agencies. There are over 100 nonprofits in Buncombe County alone, right? And we serve 18 counties, so that's a lot of nonprofits. And we partner with as many as possible to make sure that we are not duplicating services. We don't all want to be out there doing the same thing. But we are able to work together with a lot of organizations to make sure that we are getting services to everybody. If somebody comes to HelpMate for a domestic violence situation, then they can come to us to get help with that protective order that they need, or to work on a custody dispute or something like that. Also, another example is that when a client comes to us for legal help, we ask questions like, do you have enough food in your home? And if they say no, then we can provide a direct referral to MANA so that they can get food, right? So it's really simple, but we just make those connections to other organizations so that we're making sure our clients have everything that they need. Another example of that kind of thing is the community collaborations is the Buncombe County's Family Justice Center. I don't know if y'all have heard of that. It's kind of a one-stop shop where somebody can go if they have an assault. There was a study done several years ago that they found out that when someone is a victim of an assault, they have to fill out 61 different forms, tell their story to 21 different people, visit 8 different places, and navigate many other barriers just to get the help that they need to file the report. So the Family Justice Center was designed to be that one place that someone could go so that they don't have to do that. They have one place that they can go and get all the services that they need, and they don't have to spend all of that time retelling and retelling and retelling the trauma that they just experienced, right? We also do a lot of policy advocacy at Pisgah Legal. So we try to help change things on a systems level. And one example of that is, when Medicaid expansion took many years for that to happen. We were advocating for that for many years, and on our clients' behalf, because we knew that there were a lot of people who needed that service. And then the final way on that screen is addressing the social determinants of health, and that is just a really fancy way of saying that the non-healthcare things in our lives affect our health too. Where we live, where we live, where we work, where we play, all of those things affect our health outcomes as well. If you're living in a home that's filled with mold because of the hurricane, your health is not going to be great, right? So all of those things affect your health, and so your legal outcomes can affect your health as well. And one example of kind of how we work on those social determinants of health is we have a medical legal partnership with Winches, the Western North Carolina Community Health Services. We actually have an attorney who is posted at Winches. And so if somebody comes in with a health issue and they also have a legal issue that is connected to that, then they can go down the hall and have an appointment and get connected to those services as well. So, because what we have found over the years is just so many other issues are connected to your legal issue, right? It's very rare that somebody comes in who's being evicted that doesn't have a bunch of other things that they need help with, right? Okay, so briefly, I'm just gonna tell you kind of what we've done since the hurricane, because we had to shift and pivot and do a lot of things, just like every nonprofit, right? But when the hurricane happened, within 3 days, I think, after the hurricane, we had our first FEMA application clinic. So basically we opened our doors and we let people come in and use our Wi-Fi and start applying for FEMA funds. We really didn't know any more than they did about how to apply and what to do if you got denied. But I remember that I think it was that very same week that we had the first clinic. Then we had a training for our whole staff. I think it was Texas Legal Aid did a training for our staff on how how to do an appeal. And so very quickly we started working with people when they got denied, then how do they appeal that decision? And so we have been doing a ton of FEMA applications, FEMA appeals, insurance claims, and that has been taking up a lot of our staff time. But we know that this is an issue that is going to be ongoing for probably many years for people in our area. I do want to throw out a plug that if there's anybody who is still struggling to find money to rebuild a home, there is a program right now called NC Renew, and the deadline for that program is December 31st. And so we are really trying to get people to come and do those applications for that program. It is, a lot of people are afraid that it might be a scam. It's not. It is real money that is out there for people to rebuild, and we are helping people just navigate the application. You don't have to come to us to do the application, but we can help if you would like assistance with that. Let's see, what else? Okay, so this is just more about the short-term stuff. Originally, we were working on, FEMA appeals, FEMA aid, landlord-tenant stuff. We also saw a lot of consumer scams. There are a lot of people that gave money to someone, like gave a deposit to somebody to do work on their house, and then that person took off. That's happened a lot. So we've been helping with a lot of those kind of issues along the way. And then there are long-term issues that we will be working on, as I said, for a long time. But I just encourage you, if you know anybody who is struggling still with any hurricane-related issues, please have them give us a call. There is help available if you just know where to find it. And so sometimes it just, sometimes you just need somebody to help you figure out where to go. Another priority right now for us is immigration. I know that y'all see what's going on in the area, and as I said before, we help people who have a legal path to citizenship. So we can't help everyone, but people can call us if they need assistance with something, or if they just want to find out if they're eligible. One of the things that we've been doing a lot is just know your rights clinics. So just like telling people what their rights are, and if you know somebody who is undocumented, like if you just want to give them information, we have that available, and there's information on our website to just let people know what their legal rights are. And then another thing that we've been doing are a lot of emergency preparedness clinics. So these are just, people can come to us, they can complete some documents. Mostly what we're doing are power of attorney documents. In the event that someone is detained and or deported, they would need these documents to decide what happens to their family who stays here. Or if they own a business here, what happens to the business if they're detained? These power of attorney documents give them a way to just know that things will be taken care of. So it's not something that people really want to think about because it's not, the best case scenario, but we are just offering those services just so that people can be prepared in the event that something like that happens. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to Casey. I'm glad he made it. Thank you, Casey.
Thank you, guys. I'm sorry I'm late. I was fighting for my life to get here from West Asheville. It's crazy. Well, my name is Casey Steen. I am an attorney with Pisgah Legal Services. I've been with Pisgah about almost 10 years now. I'm originally from Western North Carolina. I'm a native of Transylvania County. I have done a little bit of everything there is to do at Pisgah Legal Services. When I started, I was doing like full-time domestic violence work, family law, like child custody, restraining orders, divorces. I transitioned into doing some housing work, and now I'm the director of the elder law program. I get asked from time to time what that means exactly, and there are some things that are unique to my practice area. Like I do a lot more estate planning, help people with powers of attorney, get their wills in order, figure out what they, how they want to handle their stuff to protect it from, a coverage from Medicaid, Medicare, that sort of stuff. Or maybe they got an issue with a long-term care facility or a nursing home. But a lot of what I am finding out about this job is it's a lot of the work that I was already doing with the additional layer and complexities of dealing with adults over the age of 60 and the sort of challenges that can come with that in a lot of these cases. So things like housing, Tracy talked about that. I mentioned that sometimes the best that we can do for clients is to buy time for them. Well, just to give you an idea of like how important that can be, a little quiz, in North Carolina, if you are a tenant, and we'll say that you're a month-to-month tenant, and the vast majority of low-income folks are in a month-to-month tenancy. Maybe they had a year-long lease when they signed originally and it converted to a month-to-month lease. But if that's your situation, how much time do you think in North Carolina a landlord is required to give you, how much notice they're required to give you before they can terminate your tenancy? Just somebody take a shot in the dark.
30 days.
30 days. That's a very common answer that I get. Unfortunately, in North Carolina, the law is 7 days. You have 1 week if you're a month-to-month tenant. It does not mean that you've done anything wrong. The landlord doesn't have to prove that you've done anything wrong. You can have paid your rent on time every month for 30 years. It does not matter. You have done nothing wrong, or a model tenant, never had any damage to the property, never had any problems with neighbors. A landlord can just decide, I don't want to rent to you anymore, or I want to sell this place and do something else with it, or I don't want to be a landlord anymore. They don't have to give you a reason. They can just decide that they don't want to rent to you anymore, and you have 7 days to get out of there, and if you are not, they can file an eviction against you, which makes it that much harder for you to rent somewhere else if you've got an eviction on your record. And so when you take that already compressed timeline and like difficult situation, and now I have a senior who can't drive. Even if they had somewhere else to go, they have physical limitations that are going to make moving impossible. I mean, and they'd be lucky if they could get it done in a month. But 7 days is an impossible time frame for this person. Or they don't, if they have inconsistent access to the internet, don't really fool with it, don't have an email. Most of these places they're going to find somewhere else to go. Increasingly, it's all done online. They're going to have to apply these places online. They desperately are going to need help figuring that out and navigating that, and then finding someplace else that they can go. I mean, you might know Western North Carolina low-income housing is few and far between. It is a real crisis in our area, and so when you layer onto that also, they're going to need a place that has special accommodations for them, that's on the first floor, or modifications need to be made to this place to make it safe and fit for them, which gets all that much more challenging. Elder abuse. As I said, when I started at Pisgah, I was doing full-time domestic violence work, like restraining orders and custody. I'm still doing those. I'm still getting seniors that are the victim of some kind of abuse, whether that's like inter-partner, personal abuse from a partner, but it could also be a caregiver, a family member. I've seen cases in long-term, skilled nursing facilities where they are the victim of some sort of abuse or exploitation. Financial exploitation and consumer fraud. I'm going to tell a story or two in a minute about that. Increasingly, a huge part of my work, probably one case a week, involves a senior that has been the victim of what I'll call the elder fraud industry. They have been targeted by some type of scam. Seniors are particularly vulnerable for a variety of reasons, are very often preyed on by scammers and can fall victim to this sort of stuff. And I'm going to give you a couple of cases involved in that. And end of life planning. Ideally, preferably, that would be in a situation where you're stable and you're just looking to get your affairs in order. But I've had to do a number of emergency wills, emergency powers of attorney, where like I've got to get out to the hospital now to mission to get a will thrown together for this person. And I'll tell you, there's not anybody else in town that is doing that for people, that will come to somebody's hospital room and put together for free a will for them. Pisgah Legal Services, I'm very proud to say, I work at a place that makes that possible, where I get to do that kind of thing for people. And here's a couple of slides about spotting physical, signs of physical or emotional abuse for seniors. As I said, unfortunately, that is a part of my work, and the majority of the time it is somebody that's pretty well known to the senior or a caregiver. But unfortunately, increasingly, as much as there is physical abuse, more and more what I'm seeing is financial exploitation and scams. I'll tell you a story about a guy I met with a few months ago in Henderson County. I'll just call him Bob. And he came into my office and sat down. He had this big stack of papers and photos. And he said, "Casey, I want to tell you before we get started, I just want you to know that I'm probably the biggest dummy that you're ever going to talk to." And I said, "Well, you're going to have a lot of competition, Bob, but I'll give you a shot." And he told me a story of how over the course of a couple of years, he ended up getting scammed out of close to $30,000. Bob had not had the easiest life. He had lost both of his parents when he was very young. His wife had passed away a few years ago, and I'm afraid that may have been how these scammers ultimately even found out about him. Obituaries are public record. It's not difficult for somebody with bad intentions to find a vulnerable widow or widower. But he showed me a letter that he received purporting to be from Publishers Clearinghouse that looked super official. I mean, it had like the right letterhead and font. There was nothing that would have like triggered any alarm bells, I think, for anyone. Showed me photos of a truck that had a big bow on it, a check, like some models holding a check that had his name on it. And I mean, he really thought that he had caught a break for the first time in a very long time, that he had, for once, somehow had gotten lucky. And over the course of a couple of years, ended up sending these people $30,000. The way this scam works, the way a lot of them will work is, Bob, you've won all this valuable cash and prizes, but before we can release it to you, there's some fees that have got to be paid, some taxes that got to be paid up front. If you'll send us the money for that stuff, then we can release the prizes to you. And he unfortunately went along with that for a number of years. I think some of it became almost like sunk cost fallacy, like if there's even like a chance that this is real, I'm in it this deep, and like if there's a chance that it's real, I'm just gonna keep throwing money at it and hope that I see something at the other side. Even more sadly, I mean, he didn't even come to me initially for a scam. He came through the door as a foreclosure prevention case because he had given all his money to these scammers. His home was now at risk of foreclosure. And it was only in the course of like talking about what was going on with his finances that we even discovered like that this was going on with these scammers. So much of that is happening around here. And he beat himself up the whole time that I talked to him about like, I'm like 65 years old. I should know there's no such thing as a free lunch. Like I ought to have known better. And I told him what I've had to tell so many people, which is that like, these are professionals, that they make their living by targeting and scamming seniors out of their money, and they wouldn't be able to make a living doing it if they weren't really good at it. And beating yourself up about it is not worth it. I mean, if anything, I think sharing your story and talking about it, raising awareness that this is going on in the community is the biggest thing that you can do. And in his case, as I said, I mean, it was a foreclosure prevention case, so fortunately we were able to get him, to stop the bleeding, make sure that his identity was safe, that this wasn't happening anymore, and stabilize his financial situation so he was able to keep his home. But a lot of times, that's the best that we can do for people. By the time you get to talk to me, it may be too late, which is why I always try to raise as much awareness as I can about this stuff. As Tracy hinted at, unfortunately, post-Helene, I sort of suspected that we would see more of it, and I'm afraid that we have, as a lot of money, federal money and assistance flowed into Western North Carolina after the storm. That's terrific, and a lot of folks really needed it, but it also meant that there's a lot of people that had more money at one time than they probably had ever had, tens of thousands of dollars. And that, I'm afraid, was just blood in the water for scammers, that there's people who have got some money now. And a lot of seniors were targeted, and I've seen everything from the home repair contractor scams that Tracy talked about, in the early days we were seeing like FEMA scams, like people coming to folks' homes pretending to be FEMA inspectors. And like I'm from FEMA. There's a $100 like refundable deposit. If you'll pay that, you'll get the money back once the inspection is cleared and all that checks out. We were seeing all sorts of stuff like that. Another case that I'm working on right now, actually, where I have a little bit more hope that I might be able to do something more than just stop the bleeding, is a senior in Buncombe County who was contacted by a scammer and told that her banking account, her information was compromised. Basically, the scammers had access to her entire life, to all of her money, and she had to get her money out of her bank account, because if not, it was going to be gone very quickly, and she couldn't trust the banks because the bank was clearly compromised. And they told her to liquidate it into gold bars. I didn't even really know where you go to buy that much gold, because she had like cleared out her retirement, like we're talking like $200,000 worth into gold bars. And this is one of the very few cases, and unfortunately in cases like Bob's and other cases, a lot of times these folks are overseas. They're not even in the United States when they target people over here, which makes the prospect of like going after them, or holding them criminally accountable, or getting that money back, a very challenging prospect. In this case though, this dude, or at least one person involved in the scheme, came into her apartment to collect the bars. So we were like, I don't want to say too much about it, but we were working with law enforcement to try and see what can be done in this situation. It makes it even more sad. Another reason that she contacted us was not just the scam, or like the hope that we could help her with this scam, but because this was a withdrawal on her retirement, on her 401k, she also needed to talk to Gabriel or John, one of our tax attorneys, because she was facing tax liability for this withdrawal. And it's like, I'm gonna owe like $30,000 or something in taxes on this thing, and I don't know what I'm gonna do. But that would completely cleaned out my retirement and on any money that I had. So that stuff it's going on in Western North Carolina, and increasingly a big part of my work is collaborating with the state, with other agencies, with law enforcement, to try and see what can be done about it and protect seniors. And I love the opportunity to talk to groups like this and just raise awareness, and let people know that it's happening and talk about it more. I think there's a lot, I know there's a lot of stigma just from the seniors that I've talked to that have been victims of this kind of stuff, are ashamed or embarrassed and don't want to admit that they were taken advantage of, or don't want to admit that they got duped or fooled, for a variety of reasons they don't want to share. And that's not to me, that's not helping anybody but scammers or people with bad intentions to not talk about this stuff and raise awareness and try to avoid it, because this is one of those areas where a pound, an ounce prevention is worth many, many pounds of cure, unfortunately. That's just some of what I'm doing. And I'm happy to talk more, hang out after, or answer questions if folks have got them. I don't know. Tracy, do you have anything else?
I just wanted to say a couple more things.
Sure.
Before we take any questions that you have. Did want to just mention that since we are a nonprofit, we rely on volunteers, and so I wanted to just put it out there for anybody. If you've ever thought about volunteering for an organization, at Pisgah Legal, we have lots of different volunteer opportunities. As we talked about a little bit, we do have volunteers who do tax preparation and who do the healthcare enrollment. Those are things that if you wanted to do something like that, you would be fully trained. We would not expect you to know how to do someone's tax return without being certified. So there's full training for all of that kind of stuff. We also need a lot of volunteer attorneys. So if you are an active attorney or a retired attorney, there may be a role for you to do some work with Pisgah Legal. We have about 250 attorneys in the area who do pro bono work for us on an annual basis. So we need a lot of help. We could not do our job without all of those folks doing pro bono work for us. And a lot of people who retire and move to the area, maybe are looking for something to do a little bit, you know, a few hours a week, and so we can fill that role for a lot of folks. We also have a lot of non-attorney volunteer opportunities too, like just regular admin work, screening calls, helping us with events. There are a lot of different things that people can do. So if you have an interest in doing something like that, you can contact us. And on our website, there's a button that says become a volunteer, and then there's a short form you fill out, and then somebody would give you a call and talk to you about that. And then also, other ways that you can help. Share the story with friends and neighbors. Share what Casey shared with you all. It is really important to talk about these things and to let people know that these things are happening in our area. We don't want to scare people, but we do want to make people aware. We even, I don't know if you knew this, Casey, but we had somebody try to scam Pisgah Legal. Somebody contacted me directly that they wanted to make a donation. And so they sent the check, and the check looked real enough that it was sent to the bank to be deposited. Everybody involved thought that it was a real check. And then the man, he called me and he wanted to know where his thank you letter was. And I said, well, you know, it'll come in a few days. And he was like, well, that wasn't the amount that I said that I was gonna give. The check had been for more than he had originally said that it was going to be. And I thought, well, he just got generous, right? And so he wanted a refund for that amount that he had overpaid. And he was really angry that we weren't gonna refund him until the check cleared. It was a scam. So, and we were just like blown away by this because we were like, we are a law firm. And you're trying to scam a law firm of all the places?
Yeah.
But it's amazing, y'all. I mean, people are doing this kind of thing every day. And we almost got duped, you know? I mean, we thought it was a real check. So these things happen. But anyway, share the story. We are always happy to come out and do presentations like this for small groups. So if you're in a civic group or a Bible study or women's studies group, we would love to come and talk to them and just let them know what we do. We are on all the different social media channels, so you can follow us on there. We have a lot of different events throughout the year, so if you follow, you can know about the events that are coming up and come out and support. And of course, you can always support us financially, and the website is on that screen where you can make a donation. And we are a nonprofit, so we do rely on community support. We get some federal funding, some state funding, some county funding in the different counties that we serve, but most of our funding comes from individuals and sponsorships from businesses and private grants also that we apply for. All right, so now we can answer questions. Do you have any questions for me or for Casey?
I was on the volunteer opportunities front, do you have things specifically for like law students doing?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked that because I just got an email today about a program that just happened. We partner with different law schools. There's a group that comes usually every year on spring break from Duke Law School. They come here and spend their spring break in Asheville doing legal work. And they actually come to the office and we do clinics to help clients. And so the students get experience working one-on-one with clients and working on real cases, but they work for free. And so our clients are able to get, some extra help. So we do that kind of thing a lot, and we have interns who come and work for us, and a lot of times I hear interns say that now that they've done an internship with a law firm that does free legal aid, that's what they want to do when they get out of school. A lot of folks don't realize kind of what that work looks like until they come out and actually try it. So yeah, thanks for asking that.
Yeah, I was an intern.
Oh, you were? I didn't know that.
2014, I think. Yeah. And I'm originally from Western North Carolina, and it wasn't until I interned at Pisgah that I had any idea of the vast amount of unmet legal need that there is in my hometown. I mean, my home area. It was very eye-opening, and a big part of why I decided I wanted to come back and do it full time?
Yeah, there was a study done a few years ago that said there is one legal aid attorney for every 8,000 people eligible for the service in this area. 1 to 8,000. When you look at private attorneys, there's one for every 300 people. So it's a huge disparity. There's no way that we could possibly meet the need that there is in Western North Carolina. So we are just doing, just like scraping the surface basically, but.
Yeah, and I think there's a misconception too about what like a court-appointed attorney can do for you too, because I encounter that a lot. If folks are getting evicted or they need help with a restraining order, they need to try to get custody of a kid that's in a dangerous situation, and the judge calls their name and they're like, what do you want to do about an attorney? I say, well, I want my court-appointed attorney to help me. And the judge is like, this is a civil case. That is not an option that's on the menu. I mean, you have to represent yourself, or you have to hire a private attorney, and what do you want to do? And for a lot of the stuff we've talked about, a private attorney for like a custody case in Western North Carolina, probably starts at $5,000, which is an impossible amount of money for so many people.
So you were talking about income levels for the other care. For the elder population, would that be folks that are mostly on the fixed income, government fixed income levels?
Yeah, and it depends on exactly what the issue is and what the grant is. A lot of my work is it's funded by the Older Americans Act, and I'm in kind of a unique situation where there actually isn't an income ceiling for those sorts of cases. In other words, we don't necessarily turn anyone away, even if would otherwise be over income. It does affect like practically how I'm gonna, handle a case. If somebody's got like $1 million in assets, I'm probably, if they can afford a private attorney, I might give them some advice and then suggest that they reach out to the private bar. And there are different, otherwise though, there are different income thresholds depending on what the legal issue is.
And that is the case with some of our different programs. Some of it depends on the funding source, and so that may allow us to take people who are a little higher income, but most of our programs fall under that 125% or below of the poverty line.
And so if we become aware of somebody that might need services and possibly would fall, you just send them through a main line and then somebody triages and figures out?
Yeah, people can call our main line, which is online, or they can go to the website and there's a button that says apply for help. They can do either way, doesn't matter. And then they'll be screened over the phone. They can also walk into an office, but they have to go through the screening to answer all the questions about their income, about their issue, and see if they're eligible for our services or not. If they're not eligible for our services, then typically we can offer some suggestions of where they might go next to look for help. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Just a point of interest, I know you were talking about the scammers and all like that, and it's really amazing, and the internet has a lot to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know of a situation that, I have a relative who doesn't do anything online, doesn't use online, doesn't even have a computer. However, you can Google them and find out all kinds of things about them. Where they've lived, who, their spouses, their children. It is just amazing, so therefore the scammers have first hand at doing
Absolutely.
that sort of thing, which is just mind-boggling these days. But I myself was almost scammed over a situation here in Buckingham County. Through the sheriff's office, I was called, and that's probably it's been about a year or so, and was told that I missed a court date. I was supposed to be jury duty. And obviously y'all heard about that, and that there was such and such officer and such officer was with him, and they were going to, that I had three choices. I could show up at the sheriff's office, I could pay the fine, or I could, there was another choice, I can't remember what it was. Well, of course, you know, I said, I didn't get a summons, well, we sent it this date, I mean, they had it all down pat. And I fell hook, line, and sinker, because it was so real. And actually, I did not exchange any money, fortunately. They did not want me to hang up the phone. If you hang up the phone, we will send the sheriffs to arrest you. That's what they told me. You could not hang up the phone. You had to make arrangements to get the money. You needed to go to an this specific place to put the money in, get a code, and then take the code to the sheriff's office, and they would stop the charges. Well, fortunately, you looked at the phone, they said, you can Google this phone number. The phone number was the sheriff's office, because I did Google it. It was the sheriff's office.
It's amazing.
It was unbelievable. I was like horrified. But we fortunately had another phone and called the office, called the number, and it was the sheriff's office, and they immediately said, this is a scam. But I was on my way to the bank, because they scared the liver out of me. I mean, it's so real, just so real. And the officer's name that they used was a Buncombe County officer. I went immediately to the sheriff's office. He was there, and he told me they used my name and they used exit person's name.
Like Casey said, they're good at their
They're
job.
good at their job.
And they'll do research, they'll find out who the judges are in your area, like who the clerk of court is, they'll use the right names, they know what they're doing, for sure.
My husband got one of those, and I said, tell him to come on, cause if you're over 70, they can't make you serve, cause I've just been in there. I said, so tell him to go.
You know, and it was like, oh yeah, that's been happening, you know, we've put it on our website, blah, blah, but there's a lot of people that don't have computers,
Right.
that don't have that knowledge of,
Right.
of, that access of information.
And who's just gonna arbitrarily look at the sheriff's office, if it is on there?
Well, and like the case that I told you about with the person who tried to scam our organization, the only way that we realized that it was all a scam was because they wanted their money right now. They were so
Yeah.
insistent that they wanted that refund right now, and the man got like more and more irritated on the phone because I was like, no, we cannot give you anything until the check clears. That is our policy. We're not doing anything different. And so he behaved worse when we had that conversation. And so that's the only way that I was like, okay, something is not right. Like this is, most people would not get this angry about something like that. It's just a simple mistake, but that was the only way that we knew. Otherwise, everything else seemed normal. So it's as Casey said, they're good at what they do, and so people shouldn't feel embarrassed about it because I mean it's a whole business.
For sure.
I bet he was nice when he called to donate.
Oh yes, nice as could be.
Yes, ma'am.
In terms of immigration, our church has had a long partnership with the Hispanic community, and you talked about helping people to know their rights. For us as a congregation of followers of Christ, taking care of the least of these, what are our rights and responsibilities to help if there were some of the immigration issues and some of our friends from the Hispanic community were here?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's more than I can tell you at this moment. But as I said, we do have information on our website, and I will make sure to, I think Nick, you and I were in communication, right? So I'll send the specific web page that has all of that information on it so that maybe you can put that in your newsletter or whatever. But I think the most important thing to remember right now is, and I have these in my bag here, we have these red cards that have people, the rights are written out for them in English on one side and in Spanish on another, and just reminding people that these are your rights no matter what. If you are documented or undocumented, it doesn't matter, these are your rights, and you are allowed to follow what this says on this card. And everybody in this room, same thing. And so we have been doing a lot of, know your rights presentations in the community, just so that people understand. We do have one that is recorded that's on YouTube that you could pull up and watch at home. It's in Spanish though, so you have to put the English subtitles on, and so it's if you're not used to that, it's a little hard to follow along because we're not used to having to watch the subtitles. But that is a really good resource too. Basically what it says is just, follow the rights that are on this card. You don't have to let anybody into any space unless they have a judicial warrant that is signed. There's some very basic pieces of information that are all available on that website. I don't know if you have any more to offer about that.
No, I think that's all right. We've had to, it's certainly something that even we've had to be thinking about a lot too, like what are we gonna do if immigration comes into one of our offices, like looking for somebody? So it's something that we're thinking about if we're doing events. The community, like we mark that this is a private event. This is not like a public setting or like a public space. It's a private event, but there's still a expectation of privacy, and that law enforcement isn't necessarily just like welcome to come into without a warrant. But yeah, I think the best thing would be to connect y'all with maybe somebody on the immigration team or whoever's hosting the Know Your Rights to give you more specific advice.
And then I've also got a document from CBF which has some us-specific info too.
I have a question about the legal, why does it take so long? Like you said, 20 years. What, is that because of the laws we have or just the process?
Yeah, that's it. So it's not a simple question to answer, but the most simple answer I can give you is that there are many different ways that somebody can apply for citizenship, and it depends on where you're coming from and when you came and how you entered the country. And every single one of those different paths has a different waiting period. There are different numbers of visas that are allowed per year for every one of those different paths. And so there are waiting lists for every one of them. Sometimes the waiting list is 10, 15 years, just because, well, for example, we work with people who are eligible for this thing called a U visa. There are only allowed to be 10,000 U visas per year that are issued. So the wait list for a U visa is what, 19, 20 years right now?
Crazy, yeah.
And it's just because there's only that limited amount available per year. And so there are so many people who are waiting for those. And so it just takes many, many, many years. And the other piece that I can tell you is, like, we hear a lot the question of why don't they just come here the right way? And we get it, we hear that question. Basically, it's because the only way to come here the right way is with a lot of money, or you have to wait a long, 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 long time. Like, so most people who need to come here, who are in a hurry to get here, they don't have 10 years to wait in line, right? They don't have 15 years to wait in line. And that is literally how long it takes sometimes, depending on what country you're applying to come from. And so because they can't wait that long, because maybe they have a dangerous situation, or maybe they have a family member who's here waiting for them, and they're not gonna wait 10 years to see that family member, then they come in a way that is not legal. And then they're in trouble, because once you're here and you've entered without being inspected, then you have a problem, right? It's very difficult to remedy once you've done that. And so it's very complicated, y'all. I understand about 5% of the whole process.
Yeah.
But it is a very complicated issue.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you all so much for having us. We
Thank
really
you guys,
appreciate
really
it.
appreciate it.
And I did bring a bunch of different handouts that are back on the table with the red checkered tablecloth. If anybody wants any of those materials, please feel free.
Thanks. braving the bridge.
Yes, I did, oh my gosh, I was worried, I was texting Tracy, I said, I don't know if I'm gonna make it.
Sorry to refill that.